Ryan.
Hello, Rachel.
How you doing?
Oh, I'm just one happy podcaster. That's how I'm doing. How about you?
You know, I think we need to get silk pop filters.
Why?
It's just more comfortable.
Oh, more comfortable? You want to get into something a little bit more casual, comfortable?
Just doesn't seem to fit right anymore.
Feels like a circus tent? Rachel, we are back talking about something or other. Both of us are getting over sickness, so have fun with that, everyone. No, it's not Draffa, we swear. It is 100% contagious and 100% lethal, but we don't have that. We're fine.
No.
We got our booster shots from Franklin. So we're all good. Rachel almost died from me saying that.
You had to.
I had to.
It is 100% terminal and 100% contagious.
But in all seriousness, we are YumYumPodcast, likingly because of this amazing line of dialogue from Star Trek Discovery. Remember Star Trek Discovery, Rachel?
I do, unfortunately.
We have covered Star Trek Discovery in the past, and in that show, a character said yum yum as a reply to something, and what a line it was. We were inspired to name ourselves after it, to look at everything from the rewatch perspective with yum yum in mind. So we are rewatching and reviewing pieces of media, sci-fi in particular, and we are looking at Babylon 5 currently.
Yeah.
And we are in the third season. So if you have not seen Babylon 5 before, we recommend that you do, because we are going to give it away. This show's been around for quite some time. You've had the chance, but if you're coming here to listen to us talk about it, well, we expect you to know about it, okay? That's your warning, okay? That is your warning. We okay? I'm looking at you right now. If you're still here and you're going to complain that we spoiled the fact that Zach Allen never really gets an outfit that fits him, that's on you. That's on you. Rachel, we're not alone this time, though. We brought somebody in, a supporter of the show, a listener of Yum Yum. I wonder if this person themselves, though, has some Yum Yum. Do you want to find out?
Yeah, I do.
We are joined by John, or Johnny. You said I could call you either one. Do you have a preference?
No, I do not. Anything but late for dinner.
So, tell us about yourself and your relationship to Babylon 5.
Hi, I am John. I've only gotten to the show recently. I'm sure some of you guys know about this thing called the COVID pandemic. The drop of our own. The Great Plague came upon us all. And, a lot of us had nothing to do, so I had the copy of the screenwriting book right by me, and for years I'm a writer. I've been trying, and I had J. Michael Straczynski's book on how to screenwrite, and I know you guys are familiar with his autobiography and how that was his first book that he would release, and so I read that cover to cover, and I was like, I got to watch this show one day, but of course, I was born in the early 90s, I'm just barely older than the show, so I couldn't really just, up and buy the stuff myself. I know you had to get the DVDs, and that took you a while before you had all of them, but for me, I was just like, yeah, I'll get it when it's on something, and it just so happened it came to HBO Max. I'm like, hey, for once I have the thing, I can watch Babylon 5. And I had just started dating my current partner, and we sat through it together, so it was both our first times to do it, and we loved it. We were both avid Jakar fans, our favorite character, and I can't get enough people to watch it. So I'm always online. I get all the people in my the people I play Smash with, Super Smash Brothers. I'm always telling them to watch the show. My in-game tag would be B5, even. And I got my roommate to watch it. He's a Londo fan, but he understands why I like Jakar. But we just fell in love with the show. It's just so good, and every time I rewatch it, there's just so much more to pick from it. So every episode with you guys is always interesting because it's like I've picked out so much, and yet there's so much more that I haven't seen, and you guys have seen it so many more times. And so when you had all the other pods of people, they're bringing all their perspectives, there's just so much to dig, even out of a small episode, which I would say this isn't a really big episode, but so much happens still. given where it is in the series.
Yeah, it's a great time to be watching Babylon 5 and getting into it. When we started this podcast, it was just after it got released with a HD remaster. Then partway through doing this, they're announcing that they're going to try and work on a Babylon 5 reboot with JMS at the helm, and it's just a lot of interest in this show that, as we've talked about many times on the podcast, we're big fans of. We've looked at many times and noticed all these little nuances, so it's great to have people jumping on board the Babylon 5 train after all of this time, because for the longest time when just watching this, I would be like, well, nobody watches Babylon 5. Like there's a section of people out there, but really I never have met anyone in real life that has watched it on their own without me showing it to them. But now with the more freely available, and it's nicer looking than it used to be, and all of the possible new adventures to come in the future for this series and for this brand, it's really opened people up to giving it a shot. And yeah, everyone has their favorite. It's a Jakar, there's a Londo, there are people who love Sinclair, there are people who love Sheridan, there are people who love old Draal and new Draal and
Grass, all the good guys.
Everyone loves Lou.
Deuce fans.
Everyone loves Lou.
Love Lou. You gotta love Lou.
Look, we bought a cake, all right? Been sitting there for 2 days now.
Are you kidding me? You pass up a cake for 2 days? What's the deal? What have you done with the real Lou Welch, huh? Hey, security over here. We got another guy with a changeling net.
I'm just curious to know, what is your kind of relationship with sci-fi TV? So Babylon 5 is fairly new for you, but what about other sci-fi TV? Like, are you a Star Trek person, a Farscape, Stargate? Like, what's kind of been your relationship with other shows, and how has Babylon 5 kind of, I guess, measured up to those?
For me, much like Babylon 5, a lot of those other shows that just weren't on TV or available, they're syndicated in my area. I spent a lot of time in the Midwest, specifically Kansas, and just whatever the TV stations have got around there. I heard the people watching Babylon 5 having to like catch it from a satellite and all that stuff. I know what lengths people will go to watch shows, but I was raised on Trek. My dad would get him on tape, and it was like one of the few shows he would let us stay up and watch late. So it's like catching the new episodes of Deep Space Nine and Voyager. So like watching Deep Space Nine and Voyager like as a child, and like came back much older. And there's this really cool appreciation. Like some of my earliest memories are just like my family watching the Next Generation theme, like just the opening theme, and just me sitting there in a diaper. Like there's pictures of me just watching Next Generation, like on a little tube TV. And to this day, my dad and I talk about it. They loved Strange New Worlds. My partner and I, we watched all the way through Discovery. It's great until you stop picking at it. Like, I think it's a great popcorn muncher stoner show, but as soon as you start asking questions, I don't know.
Yeah, like, why did she say yum yum? What was the motive of the writers to write yum yum? Is yum yum the best line ever spoken in the entire
Cake
franchise?
is eternal should have been a Lou line.
Yeah, if Lou Welch said cake is eternal, that would have made Babylon 5 even better. Just saying.
And the spectacle, like what they're doing with the technology is great. But yeah, like sometimes the story, like how the burn was like this guy being upset. I'm like, yeah, okay, like I suspend my disbelief enough, and it's like you're asking me a lot to suspend this time around. But I liked all the Trek. I've watched original or the animated series. My uncle, he used to have an apartment in Fort Lauderdale, and we would visit him. And I remember watching the original series on his old TV there too. So like I've been watching Trek for a very long time. I finished Farscape recently, loved it. I'm also a Muppet fan. I was actually a puppeteer when I was a lot younger. One of my very obscure and useless skills, but I loved Muppets. So having a show that's sci-fi and Muppets, I'm like, yo, okay, like that show's for me.
And it's Australian and horny, so 2 extra benefits right there for Farscape.
Yeah, because I remember Claudia Black specifically for playing Gears of War. She was one of the main characters, one of the Gears. So you just have her wisecracking and cussing along with the other, like John DiMaggio and them. So it was cool to have her as the main character, and of course Ben Browder.
I remember her primarily for Stargate, and you brought up about being young and parents watching a show and that theme tune playing, and Stargate was that for me when I was much younger. I remember being a little kid sitting in front of the TV and the Stargate opening theme would play, and man, I haven't watched Stargate pretty much since it aired. It was one of those shows that I haven't revisited, but every time I see those opening credits or that theme song, I'm just transported back in time to a much more innocent age where I was just a little kid being like, oh, I like this Teal'c guy. and then being like, why does he now have hair?
Yeah. See,
The soul patch was so confusing. What was up with that? Like, he just got it and then it went away just as fast as it came.
All right, let's get into it. Before we get the episode description up for Voices of Authority, which is from the DVD, big question to ask: who in the Babylon 5 episode Voices of Authority would have said yum yum? Who was wielding YYE in this? John, what do you think?
Masante for sure. Like, there's more than one time she would have said it. When she's eating her square kiwis with the tied up chopsticks. Yum yum, because that looked like it was pretty good actually. Or when she's like in front of the group, you know, spitting her questionable rhetoric at best, she could have thrown in a yum yum. Or as we'll get to the Sheridan confrontation, that would have been ideal. Yeah. A yum yum energy heavy episode, I think for sure. A lot of potential people.
I second that.
Well, I'm a dark horse because I have two candidates, neither of which are Julie.
Ooh.
To me, there was a battle in this. There were two characters fighting each other. They shared no scenes together, but they were fighting each other for YYE, which is Zach Allen and Marcus Cole. Both of these gentlemen were walking around saying, I would say yum yum. Zach probably beats it out for me because there was a moment where he described something coming out of his butt, and I just went, well, Zach is really upset about his clothes being like a circus tent.
Yeah, but
and things shooting out of his butt, and he's horny, and he's constantly trying to get some, and I don't know. Those two guys were just like, Ryan, it's me this week, and it was just a tough battle between the two. But Julie, I mean, she's a guest star character. Yeah. She doesn't have to worry about if she can say yum yum next time. She's going to say it today. That's for sure.
Honestly, if not, I think the dark horse would be Drawl, because that confrontation with Susan, we're like, you're not sure how it's going to go, and he'd be like, ha, 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 yum, yum. That would have been just like,
Drawl is unprecedented YYE for sure. He powers a whole planet with his YYE. Rachel, what does the DVD description have in store for us with Voices of Authority?
While Sheridan contends with a snooping Earth Force emissary, Ivanova takes on a daunting task of persuading the mysterious First Ones to join the struggle against the shadows.
Wow, what a description. That snooping Julie. Rachel, talk to us. Voices of Authority, what has been your dynamic with this?
I remember that the lady gets naked. That's the main thing that I remember from this, because it still feels like it comes out of nowhere, and that's the point.
I mean, she was hitting on him pretty hard at that dinner.
Yeah, and then I forget that a lot of great Zach moments come from this episode.
Yeah.
And then Ivanova is just serving us with these lines that are just so wonderful and ridiculous. Like, just
her and Marcus in
her
particular.
refusing to take no for an answer.
Zog.
Zog? What do you mean Zog? Zog what? Zog yes, Zog no?
It's leaving. My guess is Zog means no.
Like hell.
I enjoy this episode quite a lot. It is memorable to me because of Julie Massanti as well. Not just because she got naked, but she also has one of the most unsettling and terrifying conversations the show has ever had in it thus far. I remember her a lot. And the other thing, of course, that sticks out to me was the revelation that... well, not revelation, the garnering of information of President Clark's whole deal with the assassination.
Securing the evidence.
And Mr. Morden being involved in that. Just his voice, that's all you need to hear. And you go, oh, I know exactly how it all played out because we've seen what Morden does, but with Londo. So we already know with everything else, we don't need too much else. We just go, oh, yeah, I get it. He went in, that's what it explains why he never went to any human when he first appeared in Signs and Portents, because he's already been doing that shit. So that was the other thing that I really remembered. But even upon this rewatch, one of the things that really was really striking is the balancing of tones and the pacing, because this episode has a lot of moving parts. It has a lot of storylines. It has a lot of funny moments and tense moments, scary moments, foreshadowing, building up setups and payoffs. And also, as a kid watching this, if you've listened to the podcast before, you know that I only had season 1 on DVD for so many years. I was exhilarated that they actually came back to Sigma 957 and actually had the big aliens that in that first season was this mystery. They were like this unknown force, and it was good that they were an unknown force, and Jakar was thrilled and satisfied and reassured that we would never know the answer. And then they actually came back and gave us an answer, because a part of me was expecting that we would come back there, but also a part of me was thinking, oh, we'll never see them again. So that was another angle to this that I've always enjoyed as well. What about you, John? You said kind of earlier that this isn't the biggest episode, but it does have stuff happening with it. What has been your kind of relationship with this one?
So on the first watch through, yeah, like you said, those reveals and like kind of you see everything falling into place on Earth with the Night Watch, but then you also see like, oh, these things that happened for the past. So my first watch, it was like super like one of those like kind of a faster payoff. Is like early in the episode, I'm like, oh wow, this is really cool, especially in the beginning of a season. To like 4 or 5 episodes in, I'm like, this is like 2 seasons worth of payoff. And coming back to it, it's the same thing, except there's so much more that's getting paid off, which is interesting. Because as I actually went back to watch Mind War, and when you first see those aliens, it's like even if as an audience, like we don't know what's happening. We're just like, this is a big thing that just is going to trap Sakai. And then when you see the shadows later, I'm like, was that the same thing? I just remember like the tendrils, but going back, it's like, no, this is the same. This is the Walker ship. It's the same exact ship. And the fact that they had like that much foresight for me is like, on my first watch, I'm like, that's crazy that this show remembers so much. And like, because people here, like when they're pitching the show, like the show remembers, like, no, the show like really does remember. And there's like the payoffs that are kind of big, like the big brushstrokes, like obviously Clark talking about the Earth-Verse 1 with Morden. But then there's simpler stuff like the Ivanova telepathy is like, that actually is still important. Or the walkers that we talk about with Jakar, he talked about it with Sakai at one point. And even in the book of Jaquan, they're called mind walkers. And it's like, there's little things like that, like coming back to it as much as like you guys have, like, there's so much more you can even pick out. And so like you have the big reveals for like the first time you're watching through, but you come back and you're like, this episode's giving us a lot more information than at the first glance, which is, I mean, just the power of the storytelling that Babylon 5 gives us.
And since all 3 of us viewed this show after it had finished, we had all of it available to us and we could watch it all and rewatch it at our leisure. It's kind of amusing that even, you watched this a year or 2 ago for the first time and revisiting it, it's like all these marvelous things. But to think about it for the people who are listening who watched it that first time when it was airing week to week, year to year, Mind War happened 2 or 3 years before for them. And you'd have to consider, like, not everybody had a VHS and not everyone recorded. They just have to be relying on reruns and memory and that's what I like about B5 is we look at it at the landscape of TV at the time, it was really asking a lot of the audience. It was saying, hey, please be patient with us. We're going to tell our story in this very slow and methodical manner, and we trust you to remember these things, to trust us that we will follow these things up, even if it's years later. And I think about that a lot because in the modern landscape of TV, we have, the internet is a bigger presence as well to keep you up to date, and everyone has the internet. You can watch all of these videos and listen to podcasts that are reminding you of all these little details and theorizing and predicting and keeping you aware. Like I remember when Game of Thrones came out, like every single episode of Game of Thrones was an event in itself, not only watching it, but everyone discussing it afterwards and theorizing and going back and watching previous episodes and looking at the finer details. But like back in the mid-90s, if you just missed an episode, there would be a chance that you would probably never see it again, if not for several years. If you just missed Mind War, you would not understand that this is a payoff in season 3. Just, you'd have to take it at the face value. And that's the kind of great balancing act of B5. It's a serialized show, but it also has to be self-contained. It has to allow new audiences who may have missed previous things to still be aware what's going on within the 45 minutes.
And it doesn't stop the show to indicate that there's extra meaning behind some of those things. Like, when Drall says that line about a normal human to Ivanova, it's not something that would tip you off if you had missed that episode. You're like, oh, okay, well, sure, it's sci-fi, so maybe she's not in some way. But if you know that information, it clicks into place and you're like, oh, that really makes a lot of sense that even with that small amount of telepathy that she does have, that it would allow her to do this thing.
And even Mr. Morden's voice. Nobody acknowledges that it's Mr. Morden, but we, the audience, if we've watched the show, we know.
We know they don't have to say.
But if you're a new person coming in, they don't trip you up, because I know sometimes shows can do that too, where they trip up a newcomer who's just like, I'm trying to watch this episode, and they're like, that voice is Mr. Morden, and they have to explain, and a new person's sitting there going, shit, I don't know who that guy is. But yeah, there's several moving parts to B5, especially this episode, which again, it isn't the biggest game changer, but there are lots of big game-changing elements. Suffice to say, we're no longer in hunter-prey territory anymore with the show, where we're just watching like, yeah, I guess this is important, but it's not really changing up anything. It is changing up things.
Earthdom is going nuts over all this. Clark is saying it's an alien plot to discredit him. Santiago's family is demanding an investigation. I mean, it's a mess. But the truth is out. All we can do is hope it does some good.
Let's go with Jakar first. Jakar is in the episode, and he is just kind of
on the case.
He's on the case, and he's just pecking away at the edges of the storylines happening here. You brought up, John, that one of the great things about rewatching is you notice all these fun little details. One of the things that I love about the Jakar thing here is you, as a rewatch, you go, oh, wow. Here's the building up of Jakar and Garibaldi's friendship. They're just furthering this friendship that by the end of the series, they're one of my favorite pairings is Garibaldi and Jakar. So talk to us. What did you think about Jakar here and what he was up to?
It's incredible because just like with his few scenes, you feel like he was there for the whole episode, but he was really there like, what, I think only 2 scenes.
Yeah, 2 or 3 scenes. Yeah,
he's talking to Delenn and he's like, hey, what do you know about this thing? And it's funny that you brought up the Game of Thrones because it's the same sort of writing where it's like both of them are saying one thing explicitly, but like 2 to 3 things implicitly. And because they're both the ambassadors, but they both know you can only say so much in public or to certain people. And so they're playing this like verbal spar going back and forth with Delenn. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, it's funny because sometimes they're human, but sometimes they're Mbryo. And it's like he's done it before because him and Garibaldi's like, let's just skip to the part where you've prodded me down and I'll tell you the truth. You know, I mean, like it's like he's done the sparring before with other people, and so it's fun to see him and Delenn with that exchange because he more or less knows. He just wants her to admit it, and it's funny because you have the same plotline mirrored where it's Garibaldi being drilled by Zach Allen. It's like you have 2 people like, where do they fall in this conspiracy of light versus the shadows? Like, where are they falling? And it's funny because you have that Garibaldi hanging out with Londo in the first few seasons, and there's like a little slider as you go through the series. It goes from like hanging out with Londo, and it slides over to hanging out with Jakar all the time, because it's like this is a lighthearted, funny Londo with the hair, haha, to hanging out with Garibaldi all the time. It's like more antagonistic to like, you're just war criminal, we're not hanging out. And then Jakar starts hanging out with him more. It's like it's just another kind of overarching detail. It's like this is how like the show is going. It's like that our perceptions of things are changing as more information's coming out. Then the very end, just him throwing him the book and learn to read it and just bounces. Like that's just hilarious. But it's just something like that, and also like they like the prop department doing such a good job on the book because like you want to like pause and look at it, just like this old decrepit book with like the pages falling apart. Is being so good that JMS was like, I want that. So they gave it to him at the end of the show. They're like, here you go. Here's the book. It's like, why would you not want that book? It looks great. Like, I would keep notes in that.
One of the things that I really picked up on this watch of this particular episode, a major thing at play is perceptions, code switching, dynamics, truths within lies, lies within truths. There's a lot of that, saying things without actually saying it out loud. And with Delenn and G'Kar, what I really delight in is they're in that kind of almost antagonistic sparring that we used to see them have in The Gathering in Season 1, in which there is a power dynamic at play, but we don't really know who to root for. But here we're on both characters' sides at the same time. That's what makes it complex. But then when he talks to Garibaldi, as we've seen in the past, they're no bullshit. Garibaldi doesn't tell him directly what's going on, but he doesn't lie to him. He says, look, if I had stuff that could help your people, I would help you, okay? He's not doing the Delenn thing where it's like, oh no, I don't know anything you're talking to me about. He drops that shit once he's properly confronted by G'Kar. And G'Kar and Garibaldi have that dynamic of like, we can just cut through the BS and just get straight down to business. While Delenn and G'Kar are still in that, we're political adversaries in some way, shape, or form. They're not broken that fully apart yet. And yeah, a lot of the characters are at play of like playing up different sides of their personalities depending who they're talking to. Julie Masanti is kind of like the thread of that notion in general, but we see it with Zach, we see it with Garibaldi, we see it with Sheridan, we see it with Ivanova, with Delenn, G'Kar. All of these people are just playing up little different angles of themselves depending who they're talking to. Rachel, what did you think about what G'Kar was doing? Because he's not majorly here, but as John said, he does strike you. He's memorable. He sticks out as a bigger thumb than he actually is.
I love it. I love G'Kar. On this episode, I was really appreciating the red contacts and the way that the lighting in certain scenes was really accentuating that. I was just like, yeah, he really is an alien.
Mm-hmm.
I was appreciating that because the makeups are always great, but just, I don't know why on this episode I was just like, those red eyes.
A lot of close shots of G'Kar. What about when he talks to Garibaldi? You noted this down when we were watching it, about their discussion about helping each other.
It just like, well, you need to correct your understanding because I can help you. But also, like, the way that, like, we mentioned that during that scene, Garibaldi drops the walls and is honest. But that really happens after G'Kar's just like, I've been stripped of so much, but they didn't take my self-respect. So don't you dare treat me like that. And Garibaldi's like, okay.
Yeah.
I'll be as straight with you as I can.
A lot of people yelling at Garibaldi in this episode, huh? A lot of people being like, Garibaldi, stop giving me shit.
Yeah.
Some of them rightfully so and others not so much. One of the things that you mentioned when we were watching it, though, is there's that exchange where if I could help you, if there's anything I could do to help you and your people, I would. And then G'Kar flips it around. It's like, well, maybe I can help you.
Yeah.
Which is a nice setup a few episodes down the road that will be played. We will see that G'Kar and the Narn, although an oppressed people, although beaten down and seemingly unable to help others, will actually be able to step up and help our main heroes in a dire time when they start to separate away from Earth. I thought that was a nice little thing to look back on, because
the coup that is alluded to in this episode.
Yeah, I thought it was a really nice, well-played moment when you're revisiting this of, yes, they're talking about, like, their friendship and, like, all of this, but it is JMS seeding this notion that the Narn are still at play here, that they can still do stuff for other people. They're not just going to be the victims the entire time, and that everyone else is helping poor old G'Kar because he's down and out. No, G'Kar's still a powerful figure. The Narn are still a strong people, and we will see in a few episodes' time, them step in at the time when, all hope is seemingly lost. And I thought that was just delightful to see, because that's a thing that I like about G'Kar, and I'm curious to hear what you have to say about G'Kar a bit more, John, about how G'Kar is this beaten down person, but I would never say I would look at G'Kar as like this poor old victim of everything. G'Kar still has this strong foundation and
beaten but never broken.
Beaten but never broken. What do you have to say about all of that, John?
You can tell that JMS is a student of history, and obviously psychology, because he talks about that a little bit, because he paints G'Kar. G'Kar is the revolutionary of the show. He starts off like bitter and hateful, but it takes him learning, experiencing it for himself. Because it's one thing when you have the hate and the things of the past. Because in the early he's like, "Oh, my father was killed. He was hung from the tree," right? And it was like he was just part of the resistance, like much later. But when it's actively happening to you, when you're in that experience, it's so much different. And so you see G'Kar, he shouldn't have had to learn the lessons this way. But that's just how life is sometimes. And he's never the kind of person that you're like, he has no more tricks up his sleeve. Like, he always has something he can work with. And as you mentioned, like, it does set up the eponymous episode, right? Like, eventually he brings the Narns in, and there's actually more seeds of that in this episode also. But as G'Kar, he's got this presence and this, like, he's looking for a secret, but he actually has a secret of his own. And so it's very interesting to see him as this leadership figure. Like, they took my title, but he's more or less still leading the Narn on the station. He's still a role model for people, and then eventually we see where that goes. But even now, he doesn't really have that much power, but somehow he still does. He's still talking to the most powerful people on the station. And you're like, but he's just a citizen at this point. But I think it's cool because like that just goes to show like people still have a good amount of agency if they're, well, crafty enough and also just, willing to put themselves out there. And G'Kar is both.
Mr. Garibaldi, stop! The Centauri took my world, my government, my title. They did not take my self-respect. And I thought they had not taken the respect I had earned from others. Was I wrong in thinking that? Something is going on, Mr. Garibaldi. I sense a gathering of forces that could perhaps help my people. I know we have never exactly been friends. But until now, we have never been strangers.
On the other side of the station, we have Ivanova. She's doing a whole bunch of stuff. This episode really is, let's give Claudia Christian a bunch of funny stuff to do, and let's give her a go and have her out there on adventures and gathering up the first ones. We have Dral, he's back. He's back and big and booming and better than ever. He's making all these wise cracks. He's full of snappy, quippy comments. JMS is in full swing of going for funny in this episode, and I'm here for it. I loved every single little moment of this. Obviously, Ivanova being put down on the planet was a thing because meanwhile, in the other plot, we have Sheridan is having to deal with the new political officer. So, please, let's send Ivanova down because Ivanova, you're the second in charge, so you should go down. And I love Dral's interactions with Ivanova, just his all stoic and kind of sinister to begin with, like, I don't like surprises, and Ivanova doing her whole little monologue about, really?
I love surprises.
Do you, Ivanova?
No! You are such a fucking liar!
She's a liar, but hey, she's got to do a job, and she's going to
It's the play that she goes with, and she really doesn't know how it's going to land.
Yeah, and although Ivanova is doing, like, what feels like big important plot things, like she's finding out that the machine has this ability. We've never actually physically seen what the machine does, like from a first person perspective. She gets this information about Clark, which is going to change the way the game is played going forward. She goes and meets the first ones, and there's all this revelation, and there's all this stuff with Marcus happening. What I really like about this is it's still kind of just fun. It's just fun. It's light and it's fluffy still at the same time because
it's big, but it's not heavy.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like why isn't this the A plot? Because it's so monumental in comparison to what's happening on Babylon 5. They keep it airy and fluffy with some of these funny little comments and quips and just an overall air of silliness to the entire affair. I mean, Rachel, how do you feel about that? We always talk about like B5 and its writing and its stuff, but like a large part of my enjoyment, and I think yours as well, is the tonal juggling act.
Yeah. Like you acknowledged before, this episode has so many different things that it's juggling. And the lightness and seriousness within this plot that Ivanova has of, like, you know, it's ridiculous that she uses, like, basic psychology to manipulate these extremely powerful beings.
Because they're like children.
Yeah. Because it's just like, oh, I can do this thing.
She'll make her play.
This play, like, is all she has left. Because she can't overpower them. So she's gonna manipulate them instead because she's refusing to take no for an answer. And it makes so much sense for Ivanova to do, as well as being a really good way of wrapping out that story.
And also setting it up to be things in the future as well.
Because it's just like, oh, we need allies, otherwise we're going to lose this war. Like, that's a very serious and heavy responsibility that's weighing on Ivanova. And thus she gets to the point where she's just like, fuck it. I got nothing left.
Yeah.
Gonna play my last chip and go for it.
I like with the tonal things, with the tonal juggling act, there's a combination of things going on as well. Obviously, I find it amusing and sweet and endearing and honest to the characters. That's the thing too. It's honest to the characters, so it doesn't stick out. It isn't Yum Yum.
No.
Yum Yum happens in Star Trek Discovery, and it sticks out because you don't know anything about Nan as a character, so you are confused of why she's saying Yum Yum, because it's such a weird thing to say. But Ivanova has said so many, like, off-the-cuff weird things, but they all make sense because we know who her character is. This is the same person who gave the Ivanova is God speech. So her making this play later makes sense. We're like, yeah, that's what Ivanova does. She's had to
the
deal
surprises thing sets it up as well.
And it's an ongoing thing of Ivanova has to deal with kooky aliens. Oh, the Drazi. Oh, that race that wants to have sex with her. Oh, these ancient aliens. Like, it basically is saying, doesn't matter how big or small they are, they're all on the equal level to Ivanova, which is their stupid problem that has to be dealt with, and she will find some odd solution to do so. And one of the things that I like, too, about the tone is they allow humorous moments to be answers to questions that the audience may or may not have, like even down to something as silly as when Dral gets out of the machine and he comments that he needs to dust himself more often. It's a funny moment, but it answers a question that I have, which is like, is he just standing in there? Like, what happens to him when he just stands in there? Like, does dust, like, somebody like JMS was a nerd enough to go, does he just get dust on him? And he answers that in a little joke. And same with, like, John said about telepathy. Ivanova is, has telepathy, and it answers this question of like, well, does putting a telepath in this great machine affect it in a way? And we see that it evidently does. John, what did you think about all of these Ivanova shenanigans and adventures going on?
Oh, this is just free footage of Ivanova for all the Ivanova fans. She does such a good job because the performances, I know Rachel mentioned Jakar, like, because he has to act through that makeup, and when he hands the book over, he does this very physical movements. But Ivanova's in the machine, and you have like the voiceover, like, concentrate, stay on the path, and all the other stuff that Draw's saying. But she's just sitting there, like, intrinsically, the actress is sitting there in this weird setup. But you don't even think that because, like, you just see her face is super close up. Everything is shot and directed so well that I'm like, I see her using this machine. Like, I couldn't even, like, think of the physicality of it until, like, much later. I was like, they're doing, like, everyone's performance in this, like, physically is really good. And Claudia Christian gets that moment when she gets to interact with John, all this stuff. Very physical and very. I mean, you have all the other silly stuff going on too, and so you have one of the best B plot A plot sort of balances because it has a lot of the funny stuff. Because you have the conversations later that is like, this is some pretty messed up stuff that Masante's trying to dole out to Sheridan's like, but you kind of need that lightheartedness. So when you see stuff like that's that dark, that brutal, you're kind of happy that Ivana was saying, "Oh, I was happy to get a paper cut today." You know, it's just like you need those little silly bits to tonally balance it. And I know JMS talks about it a lot. And when he does different on his shows, he's like, some of the best episodes, the lowest moments, will have really funny jokes because if you have a levity moment, it makes that low point so much better. And it's funny because you have like the agents of light versus the agents of dark. So it's like both tonally and also within the scope of the show, the two plots are balancing each other. That and her banter with Marcus is very much what happens in the Navy when you have like two operators in a room with nothing to talk about for 5 hours. You start making up stuff, and there's a few combinations, and that's one of the combinations. You'll have like very talkative new guy and super senior person. Like, what are you on? And Marcus is like, I'm just throwing stuff out until it sticks. I'll just keep talking until you latch onto something. And
Ivanova is that great archetype character in real life and in shows where they are seemingly emotionless and stern and cold, but really they're much warmer and friendlier and funnier than that. And Ivanova, like Claudia Christian, gets to play all of those angles in this as well, because when she's with Marcus, she's like season 1 of Ivanova, where she's like closed off and like not tolerating any of this shit. But then when she's with Dral or other characters or by herself, she's smiling and laughing and being warm and friendly and making jokes and quips and stuff. And I like how, again, playing these different angles and sides of yourself depending who you're interacting with and what you're doing in the realm of the world around you is really at play here, because you have her doing, the I don't want to talk to you, I'm your senior person, I didn't want you to be here, I wanted Linnea, I don't like surprises, which is ironic because earlier she said that she did like surprises. And then you just have Marcus who's just like, I know that this is a fake thing or like a put upon thing and I just want to keep poking it because I want to amuse you or amuse myself. And it's very sweet and endearing, but also very annoying because Marcus is indeed annoying. But to kind of rewind it a bit before we get to Marcus and Ivanova check-in time, because I know Rachel really wants to go there, the Marcus and Ivanova temperature check-in. Let's go with what she gets up to in the machine, what she finds, what she kind of deals with. So first off, she goes over and she finds, where these ancient ones are, that they're still there, that they're going to be there again soon. But oh no!
Just for a little bit.
Oh no, Rachel. Oh no. JMS fell on the typewriter and accidentally put some Lord of the Rings in there with his Eye of Sauron bullshit in here with the Shadow's big eyes swooping at her. Oh no, JMS, stop falling on the keyboard and putting all your Lord of the Rings shit in here so obviously. Oh, brother, do you think Peter Jackson saw this episode and went, that's what it should look like on the big screen? I'm kidding, of course, but I find it so amusing. Like, JMS is obviously influenced by lots of things, and I'm not a big Lord of the Rings person, but even as a kid, I looked at this moment and went, oh, come on.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
Yeah.
Ease up a bit. Season 3, even though it's my favorite season, has a lot of that.
hard in it.
Yeah, season 3 is my personal favorite, but it has a few too many of those where I go, look, JMS, I know you're a big fan of King Arthur, but can you pull back a bit, mate? Or like, look, I know you love Lord of the Rings.
All of this here right now. We don't need all of this.
But it's a spooky image, floating ice in the void of space. I mean, spooky.
It makes a vibe.
It makes a vibe check, yes.
Makes a vibe. And also, like, I do wonder how much of that was the CGI artists as
having
well.
Fun. Oh no, I know JMS was pressing on them being like, it needs to look like this. This episode was actually supposed to be aired first before the Brad Dourif one, but it had so many special effects that they decided to push it back an episode so the boys animating it had more time. So I imagine JMS was like, no, I need my Sauron eyes in there.
Excuse me. It knows I'm here. It's pulling me in. I can't stop it.
It is the enemy. Pull away.
Go back to the path.
I can't. It knows I'm here. It knows my name.
Since Ivanova, I guess it's because she has telepathy, or she's just super skilled. Yeah. She manages to go back in time and see Earth Force One explode and get all of this footage of Clark incriminating himself very obviously.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
I like it and I don't like it because it's just such a random thing that happens because it just feels like they needed proof, but it's like, how do we get proof?
It feels like that should be what the whole episode is.
Okay, let's do this thing. And then it's just such a small part of the episode, even though we have had whole episodes that are about Clark's mischievousness.
Yeah, his mischievousness.
And, you know, the sort of shadow government with the senator that is working with Sheridan, and like that could have been its whole thing, but it's not, and it's just like the only time that they get to use the machine for this, and it's just like, this is why we don't get much of the machine, because
this is the last time we see Draal.
It's too powerful.
It's a Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah.
I have always had a problem with it because it does feel very convenient. It somewhat comes across as JMS knows that he wants to have this reveal in here somewhere in the show, but it's like, I don't know where to put it. I don't know, JMS, make it his whole episode. Get rid of Exogenesis and have this be a whole episode of them finding it and doing all of this stuff and getting it back and all of these fallout. But no. It's just strange to me too, because it's like, okay, we don't know the powers of the machine. It's this great machine. It's powerful. We can do whatever we want with it. That's fine. I mean, sure, it's a bit annoying for a plot, and JMS does phase out the great machine over time because it is annoying and it does patch up so many holes that you could have in your stories. And but the thing that bothers me about it is then Ivanova then goes off to go see the first ones. It's just such big events happening within the same episode. Like,
I'll send that to Garibaldi and I'm just going to move on.
Yeah, it's just, I like it all, but it's still like, it's so weird to me that it's like, I have to go down here unexpectedly to see if I can find the first ones. Oh, Draal wants me in the machine? Oh, I'll go in the machine. Oh, I found the first ones. We're going to be over here. Oh no, the shadows. And oh no, I found President Clark did it. Just so much happening. There's
so much happening, but it's very odd because it's done skillfully enough that it doesn't feel as clunky when you're watching it. But when you go back and you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, that is weird. They usually would have done more with that.
Well, it works too, not only because the pacing's great. It's paced meticulously, but another factor that is at play, and I'm curious to hear what our guest thinks about all of this stuff, but I think it is also because we accept it because JMS weaves it into the main plot by tying it off with how we exit Julie Masanti from this episode, with the events that, with the evidence that Ivanova has gathered is brought back to ISN, and then all of the fallout happens and it exits our political officer. So to me, it also just flows nicely enough. It still sticks out to me, but nicely enough because JMS does weave it back into the main plot of the episode at the same time. I mean, what do you think about all of that stuff? I mean, what's been your reaction to how B5 just is like, yep, we have this big machine down here that can just travel back in time and capture footage? I mean, what do you think, John, about all of this stuff?
Yeah, because it can go both ways for me. Because it's like, if the writing wasn't as tight as it is and the episode wasn't good, like, it's easier to find more flaws in it. But it's like, it makes sense. Like, he obviously gave himself a very great machine to fix things. And it's also interesting because if we understand that the machine's capabilities can transcend space and time, it makes more sense when we get to War Without End in a couple of, halfway through the season, sometime from now. Because it at least adds that possibility. Is like, with the right mind and the right amount of energy, this machine can do so much. And so when you have Zathras tell you, oh no, he's tied up in the machine. He cannot, he's everything it takes just to make this work. You kind of believe it because we've seen at this point the machine used a couple of times where it's like, oh, it can be used, but it takes a lot of energy. I'm assuming to even get him his, because he just projects himself at the beginning of the episode, right? Like he just shows up and he goes, oh, and my friend Drawl is here. And he's like, yes, I am. It's like, so he's been listening this whole time? Was he just hiding telepathically and then appeared? Like, you could kind of pick that apart as like, he could just on a dime, like, oh, Delenn called for me.
Oh,
bada bing,
Draw's
I'm here.
Draw's always watching and listening. He's a little
walking around the
pervert.
station, just peeking. He's like, oh, hey, what's that? And so, yeah, well, because like, what can't the machine do? And then he's like, oh, it made the triluminary. When? It's always been, it's like, okay, so it's like things that you don't want to pick apart too much, but it gives us so much more information that's more interesting. And it makes sense because this is the 5th episode of the 3rd season, so it's like the rising action in the season, but in the greater 5-year arc, there's so much more happening. So it's like he's beginning to write episodes that are both pacing for the season within itself, but also the greater story. So much more is so much more is happening at this point. Where like when I went back to watch Mind War to double check, the pacing is so much faster. Like just breakneck speed, just stuff is happening to the point where people are like, "Why can't you add this and that in the episode?" He's like, "I can only add so much per any one episode," which is funny when Exogenesis still pops up. You're like, "So you had to squeeze for time everywhere else, and you made this guy."
Yeah, we still have time for Exogenesis, but we don't have time for this as much. It's just, I mean, that's the constraints of television, especially a guy writing it on his own at this point as well, where he's just like, sometimes he comes down with a fever and writes Exogenesis. So you just have to make do with what you've got. You
gotta deal with it.
You gotta deal with it.
On an all-new Babylon 5, a bizarre alien life form
doesn't conform to any known parasite.
Threatens the crew.
That thing under his skin burrows into the spinal column and takes control of the neural system.
Now, can they survive the battle?
We will hurt you, if necessary.
For control of their minds.
They could take over the whole station.
On an all-new Babylon 5.
Checking in with Marcus. I was not a fan that first viewing. I found him annoying and quippy and too sexy and too British.
You still find him annoying at this stage.
And too sexy. Too dang sexy. It's distracting, Rachel. I'm looking at this guy and I'm thinking, gee whiz, Ivanova, give him a break. He's so damn sexy. But then he speaks. And he's so damn annoying. Rachel, we've all heard you're a big fan of the Marcus Ivanova pairing and dynamic and potential relationship thing happening here. Talk us through. What did you think this time?
I just wanted him to shut up so bad. I just wanted him to shut the fuck up. But then I remembered that you annoy me the fuck like that all of the time. So I'm like, I can't complain too much because, you know, that is what my husband is like.
So you're saying I'm Marcus?
You can be as annoying as Marcus is in this episode.
But guys, I just want to clarify, unlike Marcus, I'm not going to die a virgin. Just saying. Just saying. Ooh, does that sting, Marcus? Oh, yeah, I said it.
You wouldn't die for me, though?
I would die for you, sure, but I'm not dying a virgin. Okay, I'm just putting that on the fucking table right now. I'm sorry to say it, Marcus. But no, I'm liking him. I find Jason Carter just such a charismatic presence on the screen. Yeah, I found some of his lines annoying, but they're intentionally annoying.
Yeah,
and
I enjoyed most of his quips, even the annoying ones, because I was just like, yeah, that did kind of needed to be said.
JMS is really, even though I think he's still trying to figure out how to write for Marcus, what I think he's
getting a feel for how Marcus is, because he does need to be slotted in to an existing cast the way that no other character really has, because, like, you know, with Kefir, it didn't fucking matter.
Because he didn't want him.
He didn't want him. He knew that he was leaving soon.
And Sheridan had to be the new main character of the show. So when he came in, and obviously Zach was is such a small character that you build up over time. Now he's a main character and you just accept it.
And even Franklin coming in was very different as well.
That was the start of the very start of the show. People didn't watch a gathering, perhaps.
No, but like he came in a little while later after a few other characters are more established. But Marcus has a very different role to play within the broader narrative and within the episodes. And he gets the short end of the stick a lot of the time. Like, the way that he has to deal with that expo dump of, like, the first ones are dangerous in that meeting is just ridiculous. Like, it's like, okay, you really needed to get that in that scene.
Well, they're at this stage too.
But it's just, like, oof.
At this stage too, the show is having to bend over backwards to have storylines to include a ranger in them. And after a certain point, you just accept that Marcus is in episodes. But at this stage, it's, okay, we need to have an episode where this ranger is somehow involved. So they do this thing or that thing. I think what is keenly evident is Jason Carter gets on really well with all these other actors, and JMS leans into the inherent chemistry that he has. And so what I will say is, although I found him annoying here, Marcus is a character like Jakar. You can pair them up with basically any other character and you're going to have fun. Like, a fun dynamic is going to be had here. That's kind of where I'm at with it. John, what do you think? Marcus, fan, not a fan? What's been kind of your roller coaster ride with this?
Well, I mean, you could talk about the Rangers and the other Lord of the Rings parallels, because I think this episode has a lot of them. They talked about the first one's going beyond the rim. And it's like going out to the sea and the Rangers and all that. But Marcus as a character, it's very clear reading the Usenet conversation that JMS had. He's talking about how it's like, oh, that's something that Marcus said. And they're like, no, don't ask me, ask Marcus. It's like he puts the characters in his head. And he's like, if I put them in this situation, and it's very clear that when he's like writing out this episode is like, what would Marcus do? Is like, Marcus would just like run his mouth. Like, we could put bucket out our head and say yum yum and summon them. You know, it's like all this goofy stuff is like, he's very much getting to know, like as you guys were talking about, he's finally figuring out how Marcus is working. But to the best of my understanding, I don't think he fully planned out the relationship between them two. So it still can play in either, if you want to read that, oh no, they were flirting at this point, or they were just being friendly, having fun, waiting, like, because what else are you going to do while you're waiting? To summon a species that might not even realize you exist, right? So it's like to have a Marcus in that scene, just, it was a lot of fun, and I think the first time around, I wasn't the biggest fan, but coming back, I think I appreciate him a lot more. Especially because, like you said, like, you introduced a character like, I mean, last time you introduced a main character, like, we didn't see Natoth that much in season 2. We didn't see Kefir nearly at all. And so you have a Marcus Cole is like, we'll see. And so by the end of season 3, I'm like, all right, Marcus is pretty cool. Yeah. And so to come back with a more open mind towards Marcus was like, okay, so like, he's a lot more fun. But I mean, like, yeah, anyone could be obnoxious in that situation, but it's just like, he was trying his best. Like, he was, rattling off ideas like, we could do this, we could do that. I do like the bit about the French, because it's like, I don't think the Britons and French are ever going to drop that stuff, but it's like, that's funny. It's a good bit.
Yeah, it was a nice little moment there, and I like that him running off his mouth helps spark Ivanova's idea about how to deal with these first ones that say Zog, which is no. I mean, that's probably one of my favorite moments ever in B5, is just this giant tiki head alien thing swooshing in, just saying Zog, and then swooshing out, and the characters being like, Zog? What does that mean? Zog what? But Marcus runs his mouth and he comes up with these silly solutions. I was like, oh, I could put a bucket on my head and be the Vorlon god blah. And it's like, that's it, that's a great idea. And then no, not that actually, Marcus, but Vorlons are the key to this. And I just love that the Marcus dynamic with Ivanova. Yes, Rachel, you're a fan of the romantic pairing of them. And to me, when I first saw it, I was like, oh yes, he's here to romance Ivanova. But I do like that he helps her come up with solutions and ideas, and even understand herself by just being really annoying. It's a fun dynamic to play, because early on, you could argue that that's kind of what her and Garibaldi had, but Garibaldi was never that annoying to Ivanova, just kind of like a little snarky. Just like
prank.
Yeah, they would pull pranks on her or like threaten to rip out her coffee if she doesn't do her like this job he wants her to do. But he wasn't like Marcus, and that's another thing of Marcus is this new character. We have to quickly establish what he's like, and it's like, do we want him to be another stoic character? Do we want him to be a funny character? Do we want him to be a bad boy? And they introduce him first off as like the funny guy, like the funny, sexy guy. But over time, we're going to learn that he's a little bit more damaged underneath all of the quirks. Isn't that right, Rachel?
Yeah, we've gotten hints of that. A lot of the time, there's just like glimpses of Marcus's stuff that reminds me of Garibaldi's horny tube days, as well, of the like very clearly romantically interested but aggravating his romantic interest.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it too. And since we're in the early days of a character, the show is allowed to have all of those fun little asides to let you know that this is who the person is. Because at this point, we're no longer having Garibaldi, he's making Bagna Carta or watching Looney Tunes, because we know who he is. We know that these things exist, and we can move on to the thrust of the plot while still having character beats. But with Marcus, we're allowed to just have like, hey, yeah, he speaks Mbryo, but also, you know, he's smart. He's a smarmy little British man, and he's going to do that at you all the time. And
he gets to be both.
He gets to be both.
How long has it been since you've had nothing to do?
I have responsibilities.
What of responsibilities to yourself? You don't have to keep busy every moment of every day.
I don't remember authorizing a change in discussion to include my personal life.
I have to be authorized to talk to you like a person. Just what is it you're running from?
Don't you have anything to do?
Nope. I'm all yours.
I have in my notes, poor Zach Allen. That's what I wrote. Like, oh, poor Zach Allen. He's going through a lot in this episode. I mean, there's another character
He deserves better.
John, what do you think about Zach? I mean, what did you think about how he became a main character in this show, and what do you think about him overall?
Or did you just resent him for not being Lou?
I mean, we all miss Lou.
No, you can't hold that against him. Lou had bigger and better things, it seems. But no, I love that they just picked out the background characters and started just like putting them in. Like seeing Corwin, we had the first interview. I pointed like agape with my mouth. I was like, oh my god, this guy, he's important now. So the same thing with Zach. And then you get to like season 5 in the movies, like River of Souls. You're like, Zach's just the guy. Like he's like one of the main characters. Like it's really cool that
nothing fits him still. Nothing fits.
Poor guy.
Yeah, just yet another bit that's just seated for no good reason. And like they come back to it later. He's like getting fitted for his new uniform. He's like, this doesn't fit either. It's like, yeah, it's even it's like Army of Light. It's like doesn't matter. Like he just doesn't have a good body shape for tailors. They don't like him.
He gets things tailored, and they still don't.
He's got sensitive skin.
Probably get him a good undershirt or a men's ear. With the extra support. And yeah, so like he catches a tough break because he's circling. He's like Code 7R. He's like, Garibaldi's just disappearing. And like if you're working that closely with him, you're just gonna notice when he's up and disappears, or like things are a little bit different. So just like he's like mirroring that Jakar plot. So he's like, even in like the opening scene, it goes from Zach Allen asking, "Hey, Garibaldi, this," and he's like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And then he goes to the Code 7R. Like the camera follows him into the scene, and so like Garibaldi transitions this, and then Zach's just like, oh well. So then yeah, I think him going from that to hitting Amasante, he's like, I see it a win today, and he's like, nope, not for you, Zach, sorry. But no, it's really cool to see, because then you see him and the other people when they're getting talked to, and like everyone's kind of questioning. So like to see him throughout the episode, because at the very end, like even when he's like, do you know what a 7R is? And what do you think that he goes, oh, it's probably something I heard. Like, he's willing to cover for Garibaldi, even though he's got reason to distrust him. So it's like, he still trusts Garibaldi. He doesn't want to throw him under the bus. He's like, Masante's going to leave anyways, whatever. It's like, he wants to know just to be sure. And so he's like, Night Watch is kind of sketchy, but it's not a Night Watch thing. So it's like it could be like somewhat of a relief for him to know that, all right, Garibaldi's not, because he's clearly not buying into the Night Watch stuff, and we see that unfold, but it's like, what can it be? So it is interesting, like that more than one character is circling the truth, like Code 7R, Conspiracy of Light, whatever you want to call it. Seeing Zach navigate that is like, but he's smart enough to catch on. And it's like, it's not that big a station too, which is like, once again, like Babylon 5 has as much a character as anything else. Like that shows you the scope of the station, that people, if you're high enough, you're gonna hear stuff. Or some things that are like on a lower level, so we'll see people down below talking about stuff. Or, like when we see like different episodes. So it's like, this is a pretty big deal, and by nature, like you can only keep so many things secret. So like all these different secrets are bubbling up, to include the Clark one, right? And so it's like, it's one of those like narrative threads, and Zach is just on unfortunately the shortest end of the stick, but it's still like things are coming to fruition early in the season.
Yeah, Sheridan has that line where he's just like, like the truth always comes out, and Garibaldi echoes that as well. But none of them are looking at themselves when they're saying that. But it's the same thing that's happening to them, of like G'Kar and Zach are both in the process of figuring out the truth of these meetings. But they're like, no, we can keep a secret. We can keep a secret. Yeah. It's other people's secrets that'll get found out first.
Yeah. I adore Zach because he's a small everyman character. He's just a guy. He's just a dude. He's just a man, and he's seen as small and insignificant, especially by the other characters. But in a show like this, you're following the ambassadors, you're following the big movers and shakers, the people who shape wars and conspiracies and have these secret meetings and decide the fates of other people's lives. And then you just have Zach Allen, who's a guy who wants 50 extra credits a week and maybe a slice of pizza with a lady. And I adore that. And this episode does a marvelous job of showing a kind of tragic crossroads of this guy, because everyone sees him as this inferior guy. Like, he gets dismissed easily by Sheridan. Julie Masanti looks at him as like this disgusting little man. And
you're not important enough for concern.
Yeah, and you're my underling in the Night Watch, and you have to do what I say. You have Garibaldi, who doesn't trust him anymore. He can't rely on Zach Allen because he's a part of this Night Watch. And an ongoing thing with Zach we'll see is him struggling with that, because he's a part of this fascist group, and many groups, whether they be cults, whether they be, as we see with Zach, a part of kind of a Nazi group or fascist group, is sometimes these insidious groups gather up these small people, these insignificant people, these people who are looked upon as like lesser than, or just like as nothing, like he's just Zach Allen, and they utilize them, they give them this purpose, this meaning, they indoctrinate them. And thankfully Zach doesn't go too far off the deep end, but his character being this just average Joe guy that nobody really thinks as smart or important or anything, they just look at him as like, oh, he's just Zach Allen. He's malleable to something as insidious as the Night Watch. And I love that as a story beat, because we are following these huge people. Like, G'Kar's this massive, like, political figure, and we've got Londo, and we've got Sheridan, who's going out on these secret things. And then the show doesn't forget, like, it's about people, though, big or small. And Zach Allen is this just average guy who's noticing things. And that's the thing, too, that I really like, is not everybody knows all the big things happening. G'Kar doesn't know about the Rangers, but Zach Allen, he's been left in the dark the most. He doesn't really know how corrupt Earth is, but he's slowly learning it firsthand by being part of the Night Watch. And he's slowly seeing around him that his colleagues are doing things that he doesn't understand, and he wants to understand, but they don't want him to, because, well, he's got that armband on. He's a representative of the insidious system, but they don't feel too much like Garibaldi, at the end with him and Zach having the confrontation. They don't feel too much sympathy for Zach. They don't really, they don't trust him. They don't feel too much for him, and Zach just wants to catch a break. I love the acting from Jeff Conaway. He's so good in this episode when he confronts Garibaldi at the end, and he just says, like, I thought I could come to you. Like, I thought, I could say my piece and that you'd understand, but, sorry for being such a jerk about it. And I felt so bad for him, because you do see that there's this man who's struggling to find what is the right thing to do, who are the right people to follow. Because, again, it's like, to him, it's like, yeah, Earth is corrupt, but also it's like, it is the government. There's this level of trust that one has in the system of authority around them, but also it's like the show's telling you, like, Zach, wake up, buddy. You gotta realize that it's not good. But I agree. I really like how Zach is like Jakar paralleling, where they're picking at the sides of the plot. That both of these guys are these things that our main characters have to worry about, but for different reasons.
You got a charge to make. Make it. Otherwise, I don't have time for this.
No, I don't have a charge to make, damn it. I'm just trying to get through this thing, and it ain't easy. I'm walking a tightrope here, and I thought you'd understand. And boy, was I a jerk.
Sheridan has a new political officer he's a political officer and he's not very happy about it.
No.
And he's having to schmooze with her and kind of just listen to her rhetoric and what she has to say and what Earth is
redefining the dictionary. Rewriting the dictionary.
Man, oh man.
That scene is so devastating.
She does a Ron Canada, though. Remember in season 1, Ron Canada played Captain Pierce, and we noticed immediately when Sinclair walked into his, back into his office, Captain Pierce was, touching all of his stuff.
Yep.
And, playing things on the TV. I love that. Julie Masanti, she's just touching all of Sheridan's shit. She's just looking through all of it.
Way too cozy immediately.
And if we want to have a back and forth about that, it shows you how much the show has, Earth and the show has changed, where Pierce doing it was a quiet thing, but she outright says I'm looking at your stuff and it's not patriotic enough. You need more patriotic stuff. You need more stuff that says Earth is great. She's outright commenting about how there is an insidious nature to her just looking through his office, while in the first season it wasn't commented upon. It was just this little subtle thing that was there. But now Earth is ramping up, being far more blatant, far more open, far more honest about its tactics and what it's pushing its agendas to be. John, what do you think about what's happening in the main thrust of the story here, with the pitch being Sheridan has to deal with politics? Oh boy, oh brother, what a thing to deal with.
Yeah, because he makes the appointment withdrawals, I'll see you in 4 hours. And the last time I watched it yesterday with my partner, and I was a lot can happen in 4 hours, turns out, especially in Babylon 5.
Mm-hmm.
And from the get-go, I know we'll get to her performance in a bit, but Masante as a character is clearly intelligent from the get-go, to the point of, I would say, condescension. She's just I checked the layout, Zach, just up in his business, was she's checked everything out, to the point where she knows Sheridan's schedule. It's in most ship, especially in the shipboard, when I was in the Navy, you'd have the plan of the day just hanging up, so you can see for each department what people are doing. So she knew the layout of the station. She's taking her job extremely seriously. She knows what's going on. So she's trying to get Sheridan on board. And so her going through his stuff is she's because we've seen this play more than once, right? Where Sheridan's playing two roles, right? Everyone in the episode has some sort of masks they're putting on, right? Susan takes hers off for Marcus, and Sheridan's oh, I got to put on the Star Killer face, right?
Yeah, the Patriot.
It's this is what people think of. Yeah, this is the soldier. He'll do whatever it takes for Earth. She's trying to confirm that, and so when she sees that's not the case, she's smart. She's all right, so you got to prove, sell it, and she's not. She doesn't mince words with Sheridan. Her entire conversation, that's why it's so damning. Is she's just saying these things. Is she knows what she's doing. JMS has written this character is so smart. So when she says these things, she either believes it or is using it to an end. Which is either way, it's still pretty bad, right? Just openly being racist towards Martians, just dropping a hard M. I was whoa, that's super telling on a person. They'll just because it still happens today. People will just say something whoa, it just catches you off guard. And it's she's with Sheridan. She's I trust you. To the point where, scrambled door code, whatever, right? And so it's she's she knows what she's doing. She's making advances. It's all deliberate, and that's what's so scary, that people can believe these things. That the threads of fascism and extreme reactionary rhetoric is it can just take over so quickly, and the best part is Sheridan catches on extremely quickly, and I think both of their performances, once again, like you mentioned, they're both very physical, and when they're doing these motions, you see her her deliberate motions, pushing Zach away and all that stuff, like how they block and everything. Like the performers do great, which is extremely unusual. Because like I looked at the director and it's like I've never seen this guy before, but the performances really sell it in this episode. Like her interactions with Sheridan are extremely visceral. Because like you see his face, like homelessness, crime. Like when he's asking his questions, like he knows how to ask them. Because once again, it's that Game of Thrones like chess talk where he's like, "So what do you say about this?" And the thing is, once again, she's intelligent. She's catching on, and so when she's answering it a certain way, and once again, like seeing like how on board is Sheridan, and I think it's as weird as her getting naked is like she sees it's not going as well as it should, so she's like, all right, I gotta pull out the big guns.
Yeah.
If you know what I'm saying.
Oh.
So, and it almost follows because like just how on board she is like, all right, so Sheridan isn't openly patriotic, you know, like she's trying to do everything she can to get him on board. Like she's trying to cover her own ass.
Yeah.
Well, not doing that literally, but figuratively, very much trying to. It's like, I gotta get this guy on board. I'm the political officer of Babylon 5, and she's like serious as a series gets. Like she's taking it like it's her job.
She makes plays throughout all of this. There's that scene where she lays out, here's what I'm here to do. I'm your political officer. I'm from the civilian thing. And she has that back and forth with Sheridan where he is affronted by this. He doesn't want this. He rejects it. And she is so good at, like the actress, but also the script is so good at that. What we've seen many times in Babylon 5 from our main characters even, of having the character smile and present themselves as a nice person and say the seemingly right things, but you know it's all false. She's sitting there going, no, I'm here to advise you. I'm not here as a man. You don't, I'm just here to be
Your power is still absolute.
Yes, I'm not.
You are still like the governor figure of Babylon 5.
Yeah.
Show me in the charter where it says that I can't advise you.
Yeah, and
throw the book at him.
Yeah, and using the rhetoric and rules and the book that we've seen Sinclair and Sheridan use to their benefit, she's using it for hers as well, which I think, again, it goes back to what you said, John, of she knows her job. She knows how the station runs. She knows the charter. She knows all of these things, and it throws Sheridan off for a little bit because he's so used to kind of people not knowing everything, knowing enough, but not knowing it all. And so she knows it all, and it's just really unnerving because he has to take it. He has to sit there and look at her smile at him, and that smile is an insincere one, and he has to insincerely, he has to play back too. It's a game, it's a match. JMS is very much into, stuff like I, Claudius and The Prisoner, where those are the exact same things that play as well, where you have people playing those political games, putting up all these masks. And I really like how you see her take the time to recalibrate and see what move she can make. There's so many moments of just like, she pauses and thinks about how she can say this in the right way. It's not just her believing it. You can see that she's trying to craft the perfect narrative and the perfect conversation, which makes her more deadly. Because we've seen those characters who like genuinely believe this stuff, but it's kind of hard to say, like, does she genuinely believe it? Not naively, like, yes, this is a good ideology, or is she just another person who's just in the game of power, the Game of Thrones, having a go at it and doing what she needs to do, whether it is get naked and have sexy time with Sheridan to get what she needs to get done for her own agenda or for the agendas of Earth. I think it is great stuff. It's such a juicy way of tackling the sinister nature of Earth coming to Babylon 5. Rachel, what about you? I mean, what do you think about the whole political officer of Babylon 5?
She's so fucking evil. She's so fucking evil in a way where it's just like, yeah, I know that evil. I have confronted that evil. I will still have to deal with that brand of conniving, insidious evilness in my life, because it's just a byproduct of bureaucracy, but it's synthesized down due to the corrupt nature of Earth Dome and Earth Force by extension.
Yeah. And she is a great deliverer of humor in her own right through dramatic irony. You really liked, when we watched this, you had a good giggle at her when they're having that back and forth tit for tat, and she just throws her hands up in the air and goes like, unless there's been a coup back home that I'm not aware of. And it's funny because you go, yeah, Julie. Yes, we know this. And she just says
outrights and says, she just says it, and it's like, it's interesting because like the political office is what sets up the coup in the eponymous episode. It's more or less she's telling him what's going to end up happening, but in a funny way. It's like, and like, yeah, it's like, that's evil. Like she's like, I'm going to tell you what's happened. Good luck. Like, here's like, this bomb will go off, like, and good luck with that. You can't do anything about it. Like she's like dropping on him, like, and he's just like reeling about everything else she said at this point. Like it's terrifying.
The most terrifying scene in the episode, I think, for many of us, is
Fresh Air.
When they're at Fresh Air, the best restaurant in all of Babylon 5.
Fresh indeed.
I'm like he's refusing to dine with her, and I love that like subtlety because it doesn't look like he's eaten at all. He's like, I will meet you here, but I will not break bread with you.
Yeah,
it's just that like. Just a subtle sort of diss that he gives her of like, no, I'm not eating. I'm not, like, it's not even acknowledged to the episode. I just find it funny because she's just like chowing down on those noodles.
Oh, and I love is like, is that soy sauce? I really love how, again, there's a little humor to the scene of she'll undercut these horrible things she says with little asides like, oh, is that soy sauce? And just grab that, or hey, chopsticks, and just, I love these noodles. It's like, it's so unnerving because it's so casual. She's saying these horrendous things, but in such a like well-realized fashion. Like she's just fine with it all, and it's like it's nonplussed to her. But to Sheridan, this is all like new information that's scary, and she's just like, oh yeah, we don't have homeless.
No.
Well, there's a few raggedy people who do these things,
but it's by choice.
Oh, okay, let's just get into it. So she's there, and she's, it's very like they're having this nice dinner thing, and it just quickly gets into politics. I like how she tries to reel it back by being like, let's not talk about politics, and then proceeds to talk more about politics, because what else do these two have to talk about? Like, that's what I love about her, too, is she's an empty person. What else has she got to her other than her job? That's the thing, too. We never get to really know Julie Vasante, because there is no one to know. She just is this thing. She is just this extension, this tendril of evil that comes from Earth.
Earth would never ally itself with the government that's bent on war.
Yes, but we have signed a treaty with the Centauri.
Exactly, which proves my point. These noodles are wonderful. Do you want some?
No, thank you, I'm fine.
And this is just the sort of thing I was trying to explain earlier. All right, so you have some concerns. But there are ways of expressing these concerns which won't cause problems for our leaders back home. Is that soy sauce?
Yeah.
All right, well, enough about politics. So, how are things here on the station?
Fine. Status quo.
This interaction that Sheridan and his political officer are having is just like, it's immense. Like, what he's learning is like, because you think things are getting bad in this place, that place, but then you actually hear what people say, and from her perspective, is like, there is an inside force like trying to work against the Earth government. I mean, the Earth government's corrupt. Maybe that's an important bit that you're leaving out. But she's not wrong. There are people trying to undermine. There's alien forces trying to undermine the government. And the Shadow's like, right? So it's like, she's not entirely wrong, but it's like, it's not important like what you do, it's why you do it. And that's like the one question Babylon 5 asks is like, it's like, we always ask, who are you? What do you want? It's like, but why are you doing it? Like, to what end will you go? And when she's like rewriting the dictionary, it's like, we know the student of history that JMS is like, what happens for a long-term liberal democracy? Like, where does it go? Where does it, like, what happens? It's like, you have nefarious agents working within a government. They're like, this is what happens. Like, you have criminalization of the homeless. Like, oh, they're just, and they just say they're just they're not mentally well. And so then they're probably just, so they're just going to criminalize it rather than make any sort of social program. Right? It's like, they know what the issues are. They'll just, but these are the reason why society is best. So they just like, oh, there's someone's here, like, she's a fascist. Like, and Sheridan's not dumb. He catches on. He's like, oh, it's like, as he's asking more and more questions, like, she's just like ignoring all the material conditions, just like, this is what they are, just like, as an idea, just like this thing that makes Earth bad. Like, aliens, bad. People that drag Earth down, like, make humans worse, bad. It's like, it's borderline eugenics. Like, she more or less described us like the school to prison pipeline. And like, oh, if this doesn't work, this happens. Like, it's like, you look at, certain parts of, certain places, you see like what's going on. Like, I mean, you guys know I'm American. Things aren't the best here. And you're just like, you see like certain news stories, you're like, oh my God, it's like, how did JMS know? It's like, he didn't. Like, this is just like the logical conclusion of like certain governments that
it
like,
wasn't any different in the 90s. It wasn't any different in the 90s.
No,
of course not. No.
Things the targets change, but the sentiment's the same. That's the
different
thing too.
Examples
that's,
of the same problems.
Yeah, like what she describes is obviously we all think it evokes obviously kind of Nazi Germany, a lot of like this rising power, and then they're isolating, like they're gathering groups of the others, whether they be Jews, whether they be homeless people, the mentally deficient, this other, they round them up for their own benefit, their own safety. We're helping them, but they're not. They're rounding them up so that they can weed them out. And obviously, like, I think for us, we talk about like America for a second, but like for us here in Australia, like we've just changed governments from a conservative government that's been in charge for 9 years to a Labour government. And it's been like this whirlwind of like how obvious it was that something like our conservative government would change the meaning of these things, like oh, koalas are not extinct or nearly endangered. No, they're just having they would change the wording and change it to make it more soft and palatable for the general masses.
Euphemisms.
And then once you kick them out and you get the real things are happening, you're like, oh God, that's bad. It's like, yeah, it was always bad, but they changed the dictionary. It is actually pretty simple, and especially with like media outlets who like also use the words that are signed in this manner. It was really hard-hitting scene. It's always been a hard-hitting scene, but like depending where you are, like it really hits. I mean, I think it's one that has echoed throughout time, even back in the 90s to now with like America with post-Trump stuff happening. You just go, oh God. And like everyone always brings up like Julie Masanti really feels like a Fox News lady. And even I know what that means. Like we don't have Fox News, but we have our own equivalents. We understand what she is. Like this person who like, they look nice. They like conventionally like, oh, they seem like a pretty person, but they say these things, these horrible things, but they say it so like fancifully, and it's just like, ugh, no, I know what you're saying, but you're not. You're saying it, but you're not saying it.
Yes.
It's this balancing act.
And there's two things that I particularly want to pull out of that conversation. I think they're both from that. They're definitely both from Julie. One being the idea of the correctional facilities being implemented early to weed them out. Because we see that over and over again. And I think the majority of the people listening to this will be familiar with the way that America does that. But Australia is also very guilty of that in terms of like directing a lot of undue force against Aboriginal populations.
I thought you were just going to say refugees as well, where we put them on literal little islands to fend for themselves.
Yes, and just like indefinite detention and, you know, how we've been called out for human rights violations multiple times by the UN.
Yeesh. But Rachel, we changed the way we define what human rights issues are, so we're okay.
We're not turning them back.
Yeah, we're protecting them. That's what we say, but it's horrible.
They're just in line. They're just in line. So that's the kind of great thing about the way that JMS constructs this, is that it's flexible enough that you can apply it to what you know from a broken system.
Yeah.
Because no matter what anybody's experience is in the world, I think if you are aware enough, you know something that connects to that idea of the correctional facilities.
And as stated many times, he's a student of history. This clearly is evoking like Nazi Germany. When she gives her Night Watch speech, obviously you think of so many images that come from it, but at the same time there's enough distance from it that it makes it feel prescient. It makes it feel timeless as well, because there's so many things that do this similar thing, but it kind of can come across as a little bit hammy or a little bit ham-fisted, I should say, because it's like, yeah, we get it, Nazism is bad, but the way it's done here, like that conversation she has with Sheridan in the restaurant, it's like, yeah, we still see a lot of these talking points used, and that's the thing, it's the talking points themselves. Again, it's like the message is still the same. The targets may have changed, but the messaging is still usually the same, and that's what's unnerving about the human pattern.
Yeah. And the other line that really sticks out to me in that similar vein is her saying something along the lines of being ideologically pure.
Oh God, yeah, that was, yeah. I think that was when she was like talking to the Night Watch people about like what kind of things people should ingest.
Yeah, we need to have ideological purity. And it's just like, oh, yeah.
Well, that's another thing.
Oh, yeah, that's a thing.
Well, that's a big thing of Babylon 5, especially especially on Delen's side of things, but, like, there is no real such thing as pure. We've seen that discussed many times, like, infamously in Infection, with Marshall Teague Armor Man running around. But, yeah, it's just, this episode is fun, but it does give me a headache with like how relevant it still is with this stuff.
With our basic freedoms at stake, no response can be too extreme. There may be some minor and temporary abridgments in the traditionally protected areas of speech and association, but only until this crisis is over. We have been betrayed on nearly every level. And it is going to take the efforts of every loyal citizen to keep Earth safe and ideologically pure.
Can we talk more about the fact that she tried to fuck Sheridan? I mean, we've kind of danced around it, but that is one of the craziest fucking moments. And when Ivanova teleports in and the look on her face.
Oh, and her slut-shaming moment afterwards.
I mean, Julie is a slutty Nazi, so fuck her, I guess. But
Sheridan doesn't.
I mean, what was your reaction? Do you remember what your reaction to that was the first time? Like, all of this stuff?
I remember being like, oh, she's pulling a naked man. I was just thinking of How I Met Your Mother. That was
the television show, not My Mother? My Mother Didn't Meet You Naked. You mean the television show? I'm sorry, I had to clarify. My mum doesn't listen to the podcast, so she can't be offended. But you were thinking about How I Met Your Mother. Like, this felt like very sitcom-y to you.
Yeah. Of like, oh, she's got nothing left, so she's pulling this out.
And she's pulled it out many times.
Yeah.
As one of us says.
Very confident.
Oh, yeah, she's not lacking confidence.
No. And the way that she attacks that fruit salad the next morning with such vitriol after being turned down. And it just makes you wonder how many times Sheridan had to say no before she got dressed and left. Because it does not feel like when he's like, I guess
came up
it's
with
cold.
Several tactics to.
I guess it's cold. I'll go fix that. And he comes back and she's still naked, and he like has to come up with another excuse and another excuse and another excuse.
I would have watched a whole episode of that. Where there's this naked hot lady in front of him and he's coming up with all these excuses, and one of them's just like, I'm a widower. That would really kill it. I think that would kill the mood if he just mentioned his dead wife. He should have done that straight from the bat. Like, grabbed a picture of Anna.
I remember that he hasn't slept with anybody.
Oh, no, he's got a dead wife.
Yeah.
He has to wait for the ritual with Delen to sleep again.
Exactly. So it's just like, I'm just imagining him having that conversation with her that he has with Delen of like, I haven't been with anybody.
Oh, man. John, What do you think about this move in the script? Because it's very bold. It's a very like striking. Like it is such a power play to be like, and now guys, she's naked and she's trying to fuck Sheridan. This is just such a left turn. What did you think of it?
It definitely caught me off guard the first time I watched. I was like, oh man, like because you have to think this is 90s television. I'm like, you can do that on, it's like you can do this on 90s TV because you know like I mean, young boys are watching television at 2 a.m. They're like, what? Like you happen to catch a Babylon 5 that week. You're like, mom walks in. You're like, I'm done. Like I'm done for. Right? It's such a just comes out of the blue because I was like, you don't like I didn't even process because like it's on HBO. It's like we're used to just like oh there's breasts on TV. Yeah, whatever. Right? But like back then I'm like you can do that. And so it was definitely like out of left field. But as we'll get into in the spotlight section, seeing some of the movies and like I read some synopsis, I can tell she was the casting was done for a reason. So
yeah,
I'll leave it at that.
You were sitting there as a child and you're like, whoa, they can get away with this, and your parents shaking their head going, yeah, I can't believe that they do this. Now let's watch a good old episode of Star Trek Voyager with 7 of 9 in her skin-tight cat suit. That's more mature. I do think like in the 90s they were very horny.
It's not that bad,
Fine. Let's watch this Luxana Troy episode. Oh god, no! She's naked for most of it, and there's a bunch of Ferengis.
Ferengi nonsense.
Mookie's on board the ship. Oh no, they won't let her wear clothes. Oh, the 90s. Let's never forget how horny 90s sci-fi was. So this wasn't that out of the realm, but like I guess looking at it today, you go, oh brother.
It's more openly horny than a lot of B5 has been up until this point.
It's been lacking horn for a little while because there's been too many genocides for the characters to be fucking or implied to be fucking. So, yeah, it was such a... I love it. I love that this happened.
Other shows, even like including 90s shows, they would have had some end of the world fucking happening.
True. Okay, it's time for the spotlight section of the show where we shine a spotlight on one of the actors or actresses that appeared, whether they be big or small in their role. And of course, we are talking about the actress who played Julie Masanti, who was played by Rachel.
Sherry Shattuck.
Yeah, Sherry Shattuck, who was Julie Masanti, and I love her performance in this episode, as we can tell.
She kills it.
I was surprised when I listened to an interview with her. I watched an interview with her and how different her voice is in real life in comparison to this, because she has such a specific accent as Julie Masanti, the way she constructs her sentences. I knew there was a level of performance behind it, but I was expecting like her real voice to sound a lot more like this, and it is fairly different to this. I was just like, okay, wow, she's got this really, really like clockwork precision in this voice of hers for this character, which makes sense. Like it all adds up, but there was a part of me that was just thinking, oh, this is close to what she actually sounds like in real life. But no, she sounds a good, like a bit different to this. But I thought she was meticulous in this. For a guest spot character, she's doing a lot of work here. I will praise the thing that I liked the most about her performance in this is her eyes. Constantly, she's scanning people. She doesn't look through them. She's not that villain where she looks through people. She's constantly, if you look at her, you see her eyes darting from left to right, up and down. She's like analyzing people. She's working them out and trying to see how she can play them. She does it with Zach. She does it with Sheridan. She does it with them all. She's just really great at that. Just these little micro expressions where you can just see that she's constantly got these gears moving in her head. She's constantly thinking and planning and conniving. It is just so palpable. And she has very striking features, like these very, very striking cheekbones and these eyes and the eyebrows and the blonde hair.
It makes a lot of sense that she used to be a model and a figure skater.
Really? Really? A model? Yeah. No way. I'm surprised to hear that.
You were the one that told me about the Playboy covers.
Yes, I have seen some Playboy covers. But, John, what did you think about her here and how she fares in relation to some of these other Evil Earth people we've had in the show? Because we've had a lot of Evil Earth people come aboard Babylon 5.
And it's only just begun.
And so she's got a lot of competition. What did you think of her?
Yeah, definitely not Ari Ben Zayn or Nzento, like over the top, like real scenery chewing. It's like very, very focused performance, and is like the physicality of her and Sheridan, like in all the different scenes, like you were mentioning, like she was studying everybody, like she was constantly working, and like going through her filmography is like as she worked through the 90s, like I know some of the films are on the smuttier side. Was like honestly, is like even since like the early 80s, like just had steady works. Like I'm sure she's given really good performances, just like as a guest spot. It's like it's not often you get like, because we've seen like on the low end something like was it Survivors, or I can't think of, like it's just like just some really like bad guest spots. You're just like, ugh, it's like I would have not been surprised if like if we split this episode into 2 parts and had her for another episode. It's like just such a unique presence to have on the show, just like for a moment, and like leave an impact. But like in the grand scheme, like she doesn't do that much. But, like in this episode, like when she's on screen, it's her show, which is crazy.
It's so important that
presence,
she hits it the way that she does.
Yeah, I find Babylon 5 very fascinating with there's her and the woman who played Cynthia Talkman in And Now for a Word, where, you know, looking at them, they're both big soap opera actors. I do believe Julie Masanti, Shari, she was in Young and the Restless for quite some time.
Yeah.
And they are, when they're doing those shows, like they're doing their big soap opera shows. And, you know, you look at soap operas, you kind of, you look down on soap operas. You go, you know, it's constant work for these actors, but you're not thinking quality performances.
Not
you're
a stretch.
You're not thinking nuanced and layered acting, and they're doing all of these, and then they come on to B5 and they're given so much to work with, so much that you don't think that they would be capable of when you just see that they're a soap opera actor, because there is those connotations there. But I looked at her career, and she's got like a bunch of stuff that I've seen her in, a bunch of stuff that I'm aware of, but yeah, she's great here. She's making it her show when she comes on, and that's what the character needs, because, as you said, Rachel, confidence. Unbridled, unfiltered confidence. Rachel, what about you? Where do you stand with this performance and character? I mean, we've had a lot of mustache twirling, evil, sinister, Night Watch and Earth people, and like all of those happening. What did you think?
I love it. It's so despicable in such a realistic way. And the way that she is so frank about it as well. But you still get at the heart that idea of she doesn't see herself as a villain.
Oh, I think that's irrelevant to her.
It's like, she will never question that. She will never question the morality of what she's doing, because it's for the betterment of Earth, and anything can be justified with that ideology that she has.
I think it was a wise move to make this character a woman, because obviously we have the sexiest stuff with Sheridan, but she gets to do something that we don't see a lot of the male counterparts do as overtly as she does, which is she does a lot of code switching. We've mentioned this throughout, but she really plays up her sexuality and femininity depending on who she's with. And she really does lure you in of like, oh, well, I mean, she's a woman. She can't be that bad. Like, there's that stupid perception there, but she's much worse than any of the guys have been, really. Like, I think her and Mr. Wells are like some of the most fucking despicable people we've had on the show. Like, they're really boxing each other on who can be the worst person we've had. Like, most sinister, most slimy.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
And she really leans into that, where you see her with Zach throughout, where she, as the actress, is constantly switching these modes of being like flirty and nice, and then being like, I do not have to do that. I can just be cold and cynical and sinister and mean and step on you. And she is just delightful here. Definitely one of my favorite guest star performances we've had in season 3, for sure. I mean, her and Brad Dourif, I mean, you have Brad Dourif on, who's always going to be in your top spots. But she has done a lot of work. If I can just rattle off some. So I mentioned The Young and the Restless, and but I want to mention two of them that have, or three of them that she's been in that have had other Babylon 5 actors. So she was in a film called Arena, which is an iconic sleazy B-movie crap film, and it has like a bunch of Star Trek actors in it. It has like Quark in it, it has Gul Dukat in it, but it also has Claudia Christian. She's in that film. So I don't know if they shared scenes together. It's been a while since I've seen Arena, but I haven't seen it in ages. But then she's in another film called Mad About You, and Claudia in it again. She's worked with Claudia 3 or 4 times in her career, like whether they just are in the same project or they're in scenes together. And then she's in another film called Dead On, which has Tracy Scoggins, who will come into Babylon 5 later as Captain Lockley. So I was just kind of noticing like there's some of those B5 connections. She was in an episode of Jake and the Fat Man, which JMS wrote for. He didn't write for that episode, but we know them on B5 to get actors from Murder, She Wrote, Jake and the Fat Man, Hill Street Blues, Columbo, because whether the people have, the production crew have like worked on those shows in the past, so they just kind of bring people in.
Yeah.
And the other big B5 connection, Rachel, is Hypernauts. Hypernauts, the show that is like a weird little kids show made by some of the people of B5. Like I think Doug Nett is involved in that, and I know it's like the same like animation company do things over there, and some of those actors like Robin Sachs and Kim Strauss are involved, and Hypernauts is just such a bizarre thing in the Babylon 5 universe that not enough people bring up.
How do you know so much about us and the Triad? No one else around here even thinks they're real.
I already told you. I'm an old friend of Kulai's. Funny, Kulai never mentioned you to us. Do you always accept such insubordination, Captain Ace?
She got to double dip in the Babylon 5 rub. She got to be scary in this and kind of silly in Hypernauts. So there you go. Those are some of the things that I noted down. John, what about you? What did you kind of find about this actress during your kind of searching around?
I did see the handful of the Smut Eater films where it was like full nudity, which was kind of wild. It was like, I guess it was one of those things. Like you find someone who can do both, and it's like obviously there's a physicality. I don't know how intrinsic that was to the script or not, but the only thing I saw of note was the Leslie Nielsen Spy Hard.
Yes,
she was a stewardess, and then Steven Seagal, which I was like, I don't know. I'm not trying to go out of my way to watch a Steven Seagal movie ever again. But on Deadly Ground, she was in that.
It's one of the few he directed, I do believe.
Yeah.
And she shares a scene with Michael Caine in that. Where she gets fucking chewed out by Michael Caine. She gets yelled at by Michael Caine in that scene, and it's awesome. She has it on her YouTube page, and it's got like nearly 10, quite a good amount of views of just like my scene in this Steven Seagal movie. And John C. McGinley's also in that scene as well. I'm like, whoa.
Wild cast.
John C. McGinley? I love you, man, but he's so crazy. And she's playing it like, analytical, kind of like telling the facts type of deal and getting chewed out for telling inconvenient facts for the villain in that. And I just, I noticed that too. There's one or two things. She was in an episode of Freddy's Nightmares, which I just had to flag up. It's Freddy's Nightmares. What an iconic thing. And yes, she's done some, low-grade type films. She's very much, especially early in her career, but I guess throughout, known for doing kind of B-grade and exploitation films. Some iconic ones like Death Spa, which is, if you know your movies of that variety, that is an iconic film. She's in Uninvited, which is a movie about a cat that's a mutated cat with another cat inside of it that springs out of its mouth. Very funny film. She's in that as like one of the hot ladies that has to deal with a evil cat. And so she's done a bunch of those type of things. And yes, Spy Hard. I also saw that in the IMDb, and I had a little smile on my face. I was like, oh yeah, Spy Hard.
Yeah. She's had a lot of guest spots on other shows as well throughout the years. I got more interested in her as a person.
Yes.
And doing so kind of just a bit of research, mainly through her website.
Oh, I love her website. I went to her website and I love it. It's very sweet.
But before we get onto the website, I do want to mention that her first credit was Knight Rider in 1984.
Oh, awesome.
So she was like in her early 20s when she did that. She was married to, I think it was Ron Moss, who was in The Bold and the Beautiful for almost 20 years.
And she was in a few episodes of that too.
Yeah.
So.
But like you said, she was more in The Young and the Restless.
Competition.
Yes. Her last credit was 2015, but she's still doing other projects. So was married 3 times. So the Bold and the Beautiful guy was her second husband. And now she's married to a producer who also works with the American Shakespeare Company.
Oh, yes.
So she's done a number of Shakespeares over the years as well.
Well, that's the thing to note down, too, is when people do these things, they look at IMDb and they go, oh, they're not acting anymore because IMDb doesn't say. This is a great example of, no, she's still creatively out there working. She writes books, she acts on stage and other places, she's behind the scenes on other things. So very much like still like engaging in the craft, but film and TV is a brutal beast, and after a certain point, you just don't have to do it anymore. And I imagine too, like, not to speak disrespectfully, but like a lot of her films relied on like her being like the hot lady, and like after a certain point, you just kind of have to stop doing those, whether it's because you age out or just because it's not that fulfilling as an actor.
She had a nice quote about that. Like somebody was asking like about appearances, and she's just like, well, my husband still looks at me like I'm the most attractive person.
Good.
And it's just so sweet. So it's fairly clear to me that Sherry has made and runs this website herself.
Oh, no doubt. She's very active on social media. I feel like I could tweet at her and ask her for an interview. I would love that. Sherry, if you want to come on, I would love to talk to you about your time on B5 and anything else.
So that means that, like, it's a WordPress website, like very simple layout. But the thing that really tipped me off that, she runs this.
She replies to everybody.
Yeah. So there are a few fun ones that I want to share. So there was this comment from Roger Smith on one of them.
Thank you, Roger.
And he's like, we have birthdays that are very similar to each other.
Thanks, Roger.
And I also see that you're in the Northwest.
Give me your address.
I'm in the Seattle area. Well, I just wanted to share these 2 items with you and wish you and your family to stay safe and healthy during these trying times, and also an early happy birthday because that was done during 2020. You want to hear her reply?
Of course. Cliffhanger.
Always cool to hear about a birthday, buddy.
Oh, that's sweet.
I adore living on Hood Canal, and I wish I could visit Seattle more often. I will when it's safer. Nice to hear from you, Jerry.
What I think is great about a site like this and her replying and all of this stuff is, for many people, she was this figure in their lives, back in the 80s and 90s. And with the ability of social media, you can try and reach out to these figures. They are still, if they're still around, they're still active and engaging. And it's like these people still, doing things. And I think that's great. Like, I saw, she's very much into writing books and stuff. She has, a different series. She had a series of books that all started with L. And she even comments on her website when she said, when I ran out of L titles for my books, I moved on to I's or something like that. And I found that very cute and amusing. And I saw she had some interviews on, some book channels about, the books that she's written for. She's written and done, and just talking about the experiences of being a female author and writing female characters, and all of that stuff was rather intriguing.
And there's a second one that I would like to touch on, and then this third last one is directly Babylon 5 related. Okay. So this one was from a Q&A that's on her website And the question was, what would you say to your 21-year-old self? Get down off that scaffolding and sober up. Actually, I wasn't a drinker, but I was a cocaine addict. Bad.
Yeah, bad.
It
was the 80s.
There would be no use in telling me to stop. It doesn't work that way. But I would tell myself to examine and face what made me resort to seeking numbness and work on it. Good news is, I did.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, that's nice. I mean, it was the 80s. She was a model, you know.
Yeah. I'm like,
living the lifestyle.
Yep, that makes sense. That makes
tough.
sense. And then the last one was like, somebody was just like, oh, it was great to see you in Babylon 5. And she's like, thank you. It was a blast to shoot. I only wish Miss Masanti could have come back a few times.
We all do. We all wish Julie could have come back. Reboot? Listen up, JMS. Bring her back.
So I'll see you when we finish cleaning up this mess back home. Damage control is a great waste of time, effort, and resources, Mr. Allen. But sooner or later, we'll find whoever is responsible for this outrage. And they'll be punished. Severely. Publicly. And permanently.
What are we going to rate Voices of Authority on our impressive system of Yum being bad or Yum Yum being good? Rachel?
Yum Yum.
Yum yum.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I thought this was a brilliantly paced episode, some striking scenes, building up the tension, paying off things while still setting things up. It's a yum yum from me.
Yum yum.
John, you're the guest. You're the last one here. You get to finally get to say, like, what do you think? Yum or yum yum?
Oh, it's a yum yum. For sure.
Yum yum.
Right, let's hear what Rachel and I will be watching and talking about next time on Babylon 5.
On the next Babylon 5.
Dust to Dust. A drug allowing users to step inside another individual's mind gives Jakar the chance to discover Molari's secrets, and gives Psychor cop Bester a reason to investigate B5.
Bester, baby!
Oh. He's back.
He's back in action. You gotta love Walter Koenig getting to act. I can't wait to talk about Dust to Dust. That is, I mean, it's a standout episode for me. But that is all we've got for you for this one, everyone listening. Thank you so much, John, for coming on and joining us to discuss Babylon 5, an episode of Babylon 5. Would love to have you on again sometime in the future. Is there anything you want to tell us about? Is there anything you want to plug or just say?
If you want to follow me on Twitter, at BlabAlongGuy or at B5 Subplots. Both of those are me. I know B5 Subplots will be locked until the new show.
Yeah.
No ideas, right?
Because you on that one, you were making fun, like, Babylon 5 subplots of, like, wouldn't this be fun, like, if Veer and Linnea played pinball or something or other. I really enjoyed those. They're really fun to have a look at.
Yeah, because I know a lot of people have fun with those just because we enjoy the characters so much. I thought, you know, you put enough characters in like certain situations, things will happen. And I talk about Smash a lot. I usually do commentary. So check out projectplusgame.com. That's pretty good. There's a scene just about in every city. There's actually a big Smash scene in Melbourne. So I always wanted to go because I know the Melee's got a big scene. So I would love to come compete, and you guys would know.
Yeah, Smash is a big thing down here. I'm not into Smash as much. I'm not a Nintendo in person. I like it, but we do have a place here in the city where like there's a gaming store, and they have it's like 3 levels on the gaming store, and the top level is just like play Smash.
Yeah.
Play Smash, like it's just a whole thing dedicated to Smash. So it is popular here, like it is everywhere. It feels like it's popular everywhere. No, let's make a bold stand. New Zealand, not into Smash enough. They need to boost up their Smash record. I'm sorry, New Zealand, you're being called out by me, an Australian. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Beat me in Smash? You don't play it. I'm sorry. It's just the truth. I'm just saying it right now. If you want to have a go at me, come onto our social media and have a go, which we are on all of them under YumYumPod or YumYumPodcast. We're posting there regularly, interacting with people, having a good old time.
And if you want to send a private complaint, via email. It's yumyumpod@gmail.com.
Yes, all of this is in the description below. Come on over to our Patreon. A lot of stuff is happening on there at the moment. There's been stuff bubbling up that we've been in the works of. At the moment, we are doing the X-Men movies once a month. We're looking at those. Yes, eventually we'll be the only people in the world to have watched and talked about New Mutants. Yeah, pretty bold claim, but it's true. We've also been discussing on there a little TV show that we've mentioned a few times.
We?
Yeah, we.
No, you.
We. Oh, we've mentioned it, but I've mentioned it. Space Above and Beyond is a show we have mentioned a variety of times on this podcast, mainly me, and we've decided on our Patreon to start watching it. Rachel hasn't seen the show before, I have, so that's the dynamic there. So once a week, we're looking at an episode of the 1990s hidden sci-fi gem, Space Above and Beyond. So if you want to hear that fresh as it comes out, come on over. We also have a group Discord you're going to be a part of if you join our Patreon. But that is all we've got. Jakar was here. He said a lot.
But he did not say his iconic line from The Gathering.
He didn't say it. But, John, real talk for a second. Do you miss the fact that Jakar never says good eating to you ever again in the show?
Yeah, it does hurt a little bit. It's such a good line. It's just the delivery and everything is good eating to you. And the emotions, it's perfect.
Jay, reboot? We're not going to give JMS ideas. We won't do that. He doesn't like it, but put that in. Put that in every episode where he says good eating to you. Bring that back, please.
I just want that to be his default salutation.
Yeah, that's what I want too, but I guess we'll make it our default salutation. Good eating to you.
Good eating to you too.